What if I told you that a man who could buy entire countries was in reality completely bankrupt? It's a controversial idea, isn't it? We live in a world that screams from the rooftops that money is power, that the CEO on the cover of a magazine is the one who has it all figured out. But this story, right here, is the one that proves true wealth has a currency all its own. And it's a currency you'll never find on the stock market. This is a story that delivers a fast and powerful reward for anyone who has ever felt that there must be more to life than just a race for riches. This is the unbelievable but true account of what happened when a wilderness guide had to rescue a lost Seonli for him to get the shock of his life when he realized she secretly owned the very land he was planning to conquer. We're talking about Robert Flores, a corporate titan living in a world of glass and steel. A man whose heart had grown as cold as his cash. And we're talking about Justine Evans, a humble, unassuming guide whose only real possessions were her integrity and a deep connection to the forest she called home. Their two worlds were never meant to collide. But destiny, as it often does, had a stunning plot twist in mind. A dangerous solo hike, a terrifying storm, and a desperate rescue forced these two opposites together. This isn't just a story about survival, it's about the shocking moment a man who prided himself on knowing everything realizes he knows nothing at all about the things that truly matter. It's a journey of redemption that begins with him being found. In more ways than one. The central premise is as powerful as it is heartaching. What happens when a man defined by his arrogance is forced to surrender his life into the hands of a woman whose entire world he is, unknowingly, about to destroy? The secret she holds is a ticking time bomb that will redefine his entire existence. How he reacts when he discovers that the simple guide is actually the powerful landowner he's been searching for is a lesson in humility, love, and overcoming. That will stay with you. We are so excited to dive into this emotional story with you. But before we begin this journey, let us know in the comments what beautiful city or town you're watching from right now. We truly want to imagine the scene with you and see how far our stories have reached. And if you believe that a heartaching story can make a difference, do us a huge favor, hit that like button. Be sure to follow our channel so you never miss out, and please share this video with one person you know who will be touched by it. You know, it's funny how life works. One minute you're a high-flying CEO, the undisputed king of your concrete kingdom, and the next you're just a man, lost and humbled by a nature you never respected. This is the heart of an incredible story, a tale where destiny plays its hand in the most unexpected way. It's a narrative that peels back the layers of a man who had everything, only to find the one thing he truly needed during a desperate rescue that would change his life forever. The core of this emotional journey revolves around a powerful CEO and a seemingly simple wilderness guide. Their worlds weren't just different, they were entire universes apart, operating on principles that couldn't be more opposed. Yet, a surprising twist of fate brings them together. The encounter, born from a moment of crisis, sets the stage for a plot twist so profound that it feels like it was written in the stars, a secret waiting to be unveiled in the heart of the wild. What makes this story so heartaching is the sheer surprise of the central revelation. Imagine the shock on this powerful man's face, a man used to buying whatever and whoever he wanted. He is saved by a woman, a humble guide, and just as he's piecing his world back together, he discovers her secret identity. It's a moment of pure disbelief, a genuine shock that rattles the very foundation of his carefully constructed reality. A plot twist for the ages. This isn't just a story of survival, it's a story of kindness and human connection in its purest form. The guide, Justine Evans, offers her help without a hint of wanting anything in return. The rescue is an act of genuine compassion, a stark contrast to the transactional world the CEO, Robert Flores, inhabits. This simple act of kindness becomes the catalyst for everything that follows, planting a seed of change in a heart that had long been closed off and cold. The true emotional weight comes from the eventual reveal this unassuming guide is, in fact, the landowner of the very wilderness he was plotting to conquer. It's a surprise of epic proportions. The man who saw the sprawling forest as a commodity, a line item on a balance sheet, is rescued and then schooled by the secret owner. This incredible plot twist serves as the ultimate lesson in humility, delivered by the very person he would have initially dismissed. This powerful CEO had a destiny he couldn't have foreseen, one that involved getting lost to truly be found. The story of his rescue is just the beginning. The real journey was the one that would lead him to an emotional crossroads. He was about to be shocked to his core, realizing that the unassuming guide who saved his life held a power far greater than his own, a secret that would force him to question everything. But how did he end up in such a precarious situation to begin with? It all started with a classic case of pride, didn't it? Robert Flores, a CEO whose name echoed in boardrooms across the globe, figured a little solo hike was nothing. He saw the wilderness not as a living, breathing entity, but as a backdrop, another asset to be mentally appraised. He packed light, armed with an ego heavier than any survival gear, completely underestimating the raw, untamed power of the mountains he sought to conquer for his portfolio. What a classic mistake. He marched into the woods with the same confidence, head carry into a hostile takeover, expecting the trails to bend to his will. But the forest doesn't care about stock prices or quarterly reports. A wrong turn here, a dismissive glance at the sky there, and suddenly, the familiar path was gone. Robert, the man who navigated the treacherous waters of international business, was officially and dangerously lost. The irony was so thick you could almost taste it. Panic, an emotion he usually inspired in others, began to creep in. The sun, once a pleasant companion, was now a ticking clock, dipping below the peaks with alarming speed. Every tree looked the same, every shadow held a new imagined threat. For the first time in his adult life, Robert Flores was not in control. This journey of overcoming was just beginning, and he was shockingly unprepared for the humbling lesson that destiny had in store for him. He was a CEO accustomed to a world of bespoke luxury and absolute power, where his every whim was catered to. Out here, though, his platinum credit card was just a useless piece of plastic. His designer hiking boots, now scuffed and muddy, were a mockery of his disconnect from this world. He was learning a hard lesson: nature is the great equalizer. And his status meant absolutely nothing to the chilling wind or the encroaching darkness. A true shock to the system. The wilderness, in its majestic indifference, began to dismantle him piece by piece. His arrogance evaporated with his dwindling water supply, replaced by a primal fear he'd only ever read about. He was just a man, after all. A man who had built an empire of glass and steel, now facing the terrifying realization that he couldn't even build a simple shelter. The journey of overcoming his own hubris had begun, and it was proving to be a brutal one. As dusk settled, a chilling realization washed over him. He wasn't just lost, he was in real trouble. An ankle twisted during a clumsy slide down a ravine sent a sharp, shocking pain up his leg. He was injured, alone, and completely at the mercy of the elements. The powerful CEO was reduced to a desperate survivor, his world shrinking to a single urgent need: rescue. Little did he know, his destiny was about to walk right toward him. And just when the curtain of despair was about to fall, there was a light. Not a heavenly one, but something far more practical: the steady beam of a flashlight cutting through the gloom. That light belonged to Justine Evans, a local guide who knew these woods like the back of her hand. She moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of years spent listening to the forest's secrets, a stark contrast to the man she was about to find, a man who only knew how to give orders. She found Robert Flores leaning against a tree, his face a mask of pain and frustration, He looked up, expecting. Well, who knows what he expected? But he certainly didn't expect the calm, unassuming kindness in her eyes. Justine, a skilled and expert guide, saw not a CEO, but simply a person in need of help. She approached him not with pity, but with a gentle strength that was immediately and surprisingly disarming for a man like Robert. Without asking for his name, his title, or his story, she simply went to work. Her touch was professional yet heart-aching as she examined his injured ankle. She offered him water and a high-energy bar from her pack, simple gestures of kindness that felt monumental in his desperate state. In a world where everything had a price, this unconditional help was a foreign concept to Robert, a truly emotional and unexpected gift. Justine Evans was the epitome of an unassuming hero. She wasn't looking for a reward or recognition. This was simply who she was. Her expertise was evident in every efficient movement, from the way she fashioned a makeshift splint to how she navigated the terrain in the dark. The rescue was unfolding with a quiet grace, a testament to her profound connection with the wilderness. This was her home, and she was its gentle yet firm protector. Her kindness was a puzzle Robert couldn't immediately solve. He was so used to transactions, to quid pro quo, that this selfless act of rescue felt like a glitch in the system. He kept waiting for the catch, for the moment she'd reveal what she wanted from him, but it never came. Justine's assistance was pure, a heart-aching display of humanity that began to sow the first seeds of change in his hardened perspective. She offered him her expertise, her warmth, and her guidance without asking for a single thing in return. For a man whose entire life was built on leverage and negotiation, this was a profoundly emotional experience. The rescue was more than just physical, it was the beginning of a rescue of his very soul. Guided by a woman who had no idea of the internal walls she was beginning to tear down with her simple, profound kindness. As they began the slow trek back towards civilization, Robert's old habits died hard. Even in his weakened state, he couldn't help but let his arrogance seep through. He'd ask questions with a dismissive tone, as if quizzing an underling. "Are you sure this is the right way?" He'd challenge the powerful CEO, still trying to assert control even when he had none. He treated the guide, his savior, with an air of condescension he usually reserved for his junior executives. He operated under the assumption that his money and status still held currency out here in the dirt and shadows. He'd make casual remarks about the fortune he would bestow upon her for her troubles, as if her help was just another service to be purchased. It was his default setting, believing that wealth made him inherently superior, that his world of luxury, yachts and penthouse views made him a more significant human than this simple woman of the woods. Justine, however, was like a river stone, smoothed by the current and impossible to rattle. She'd absorb his condescending remarks with a quiet patience that was frankly infuriating to him. She didn't bite back or get defensive, she simply answered his questions with facts and continued to lead the way. Her calm demeanor was a silent rebuttal to his bluster, a quiet announcement that his brand of power was useless here. The guide was unfazed by the CEO. Robert found himself in an unfamiliar position. His usual tactics of intimidation and authority were failing spectacularly. He was the one who needed her, not the other way around. Every time he tried to pull rank, the wilderness would remind him of his vulnerability with a stumble or a sharp pain from his ankle. He was in her world now, playing by her rules, and the slow realization that his status was irrelevant was a bitter pill to swallow. He couldn't comprehend her lack of awe. People were usually falling over themselves to be in his presence, to win his favor. But Justine Evans treated him with the same straightforward respect she'd likely offer anyone else she found injured in her forest. This egalitarian approach was a direct challenge to his entire worldview. The CEO was being rescued, yes, but he was also being subtly schooled in a lesson of humility he never signed up for. His condescension was a shield, a desperate attempt to maintain his sense of self in a situation where it was being systematically stripped away. He assumed his money made him the most important person in any room, or in this case, any forest. But as Justine navigated them through the darkness with a skill that was nothing short of masterful, a tiny, unsettling thought began to form in his mind. What if he wasn't the superior one in this equation at all? As the hours wore on, something began to shift inside Robert. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a slow, creeping sense of awe. He watched Justine read the landscape, interpreting bent twigs and the distant call of an owl like they were paragraphs in a book she knew by heart. Her profound knowledge of the land was undeniable, a form of intelligence his Ivy League education had never prepared him for. This guide wasn't just walking, she was communing with the wild. Her quiet confidence was what truly started to dismantle his prejudices. She never boasted or felt the need to prove her expertise. It was simply there, in her every step and decision. For a CEO used to a world of loud proclamations and chest humping, her silent competence was both baffling and deeply impressive. There was a strength in her that was rooted in something real, something earned, not just acquired. This was a surprise he didn't see coming. He started asking different kinds of questions, his tone shifting from condescending to curious. He wasn't just testing her anymore, he was genuinely trying to understand. "How did you know that?" Head asked, after she pointed out a landmark in the near-total darkness. Each answer she gave was a small revelation, chipping away at the armor of his arrogance and leaving him intrigued by the woman, who was so much more than just a simple guide. Robert Flores was a man who prided himself on being able to read people, to find their leverage and exploit it. But Justine was an enigma. She was self-sufficient in a way he couldn't comprehend, her confidence not stemming from a bank account or a title, but from within. This realization left him feeling strangely exposed, as if his entire life's work was being weighed and found wanting against her quiet authenticity. This was a journey of overcoming he hadn't anticipated. He found himself watching her, studying the focused expression on her face as she scanned the path ahead. He was impressed, yes, but it was more than that. He was drawn to her. Her connection to this untamed world was a source of power he'd never encountered, a quiet strength that was beginning to look a lot more appealing than the noisy, hollow power he was used to. The CEO was intrigued by the guide, and the feeling was completely new to him. The initial condescension was melting away, replaced by a grudging, and then genuine respect. He came into this forest seeing it as a thing to be conquered, and he was leaving it leaning on the arm of its master. The journey was far from over, but his perspective had already been irrevocably altered. He was beginning to suspect that Justine Evans's knowledge of this land was not just her job, it was her very essence. Finally, they saw the faint lights of a distant road, a sign that their ordeal was nearly over. Robert, reverting to his most comfortable language, immediately started talking about payment. "I want to compensate you for your time, of course," he began, already mentally calculating a sum that would be obscenely generous. He saw it as the only way to re-establish the old hierarchy, to put himself back in the position of power as the benefactor, the CEO. He pulled out his checkbook, a gesture that felt absurdly out of place in the rustic setting. "Name your price," he said, his voice regaining some of its old authority. "Seriously, whatever you want. Consider it a token of my appreciation." He fully expected her to be thrilled, perhaps even a little flustered by the offer of a life-changing amount of money. He was stunned by what happened next, a quiet moment that would become a pivotal memory for him. Justine simply shook her head, a small, gentle smile playing on her lips. "I don't want your money, Robert," she said, her voice soft but firm. He was shocked into silence. He stared at her, certain he must have misheard. This was his go-to move. The solution to every problem, the ultimate expression of value. and she had just refused it. The surprise on his face must have been comical, the look of a man whose entire operating system had just crashed. "I'm sorry?" He stammered, the word feeling foreign in his mouth. Everyone has a price. It was a mantra he had lived by his entire professional life. It was the foundation upon which he had built his empire. But Justine's gaze was unwavering. "Some things aren't for sale," she replied simply. "My helping you tonight? That's one of them. It was just the right thing to do." The words hung in the air, simple, powerful, and utterly incomprehensible to the CEO. Robert was truly stunned. He couldn't process the refusal. In his world, refusing a blank check was not just foolish, it was an act of defiance. It was a statement that his wealth, the very core of his identity and power, had no value here. This quiet, unassuming guide had, with a few simple words, rendered his greatest weapon completely useless. He was left speechless, holding a pen and a checkbook that suddenly felt like children's toys. This moment was a greater shock to his system than getting lost had been. It was a gentle but firm rejection of everything he stood for. He was the one who had been rescued, and now he was the one being taught a lesson in value by the person he had initially looked down upon. Her refusal of his money wasn't an insult, it was a gift of a different kind. A surprise that opened up a chasm of questions he had no idea how to answer. As they covered the last stretch of their journey, a different kind of conversation began to flow between them, now that the awkwardness of the money issue had passed. With the offer of payment off the table, a more genuine connection started to form. Justine, seeing his genuine curiosity, began to share stories of the land. She spoke of it not as a property, but as a living tapestry of history and memory, her voice filled with a deep, emotional reverence. She pointed to a cluster of ancient oaks, telling him how her great-grandfather had planted them, and how her family had been stewards of this land for generations. Each story was a brushstroke, painting a picture of a richness he'd never known. His wealth was counted in dollars and assets, hers was measured in sunsets, ancestral memories, and the quiet rhythm of the seasons. This was the secret of the true landowner, a wealth of spirit and belonging. Robert listened, captivated. He was a CEO, a man who dealt in facts, figures, and projections. But her words were filled with a different kind of data, a heart-aching narrative that spoke of a deep, unbreakable connection to this place. He realized that she didn't just work in this wilderness, she was a part of it, as much as the trees and the river. It was a level of belonging he, for all his possessions, had never felt anywhere. He had spent his life acquiring things, building an empire that was vast but ultimately impersonal. Justine's world was the opposite. It was deeply personal, rich, with stories that gave every rock and stream a profound meaning. He started to see the forest through her eyes, not as a collection of resources to be developed, but as a sanctuary, a legacy. The emotional weight of her connection to this place was palpable, a powerful force he was beginning to admire. This unassuming guide was showing him a form of wealth that couldn't be liquidated or leveraged. It was a heritage, a deep, abiding love for a piece of the earth that had nurtured her family for a century. For the first time, Robert felt a pang of something he could only describe as envy. He owned so much, but he possessed so little of this kind of richness. Her stories were a quiet testament to a life lived with purpose and connection. Her narrative was a stark contrast to the hollow ambition that had driven him for so long. The heart-aching tales of her ancestors and her deep love for the land were opening his eyes to a new definition of success. He was completely unaware, of course, that the land she spoke of with such passion was the very same land he was about to tell her he planned to bulldoze. The stage was set for an incredible and incredibly awkward revelation. Feeling a new, comfortable rapport between them, Robert's excitement got the better of him. He was still the CEO, after all, and his latest project was his pride and joy. Unaware of the monumental irony of the situation, He started telling this gentle guide about his company's ambitious new plan. "You know this whole area," he began, a sweep of his hand indicating the vast wilderness around them, "is about to get a major upgrade." He spoke with the passion he usually reserved for his shareholders, his eyes gleaming with the vision of his grand design. "We're building a massive luxury resort right here," he announced proudly. "Golf courses, five-star hotels, exclusive villas. It's going to be the most exclusive destination on the continent." He was painting a picture of progress and profit, completely oblivious to the fact that he was describing the desecration of her entire world to her face. Justine listened, her expression unreadable in the dim light. She remained silent as he detailed the scale of the development, his words echoing foolishly in the sacred quiet of the forest. He mistook her silence for awe, or perhaps intimidation, at the sheer scale of his power and vision. He was the mighty CEO, revealing his plans to a simple local, expecting her to be impressed by the promise of jobs and economic boom. He had no idea about her secret. He excitedly told her about the land acquisition, how his company had been secretly buying up parcels for years, preparing for this very moment. "We've almost got it all locked down," he said with a conspiratorial wink. "It's the perfect, untouched canvas for our masterpiece." He was so lost in his own narrative of conquest that he failed to notice the subtle shift in her posture, the way her hand tightened slightly on her walking stick. He was revealing his whole plot to the one person he shouldn't have. He was a man, describing a diamond he was about to shatter to the very person who had painstakingly polished it for a lifetime. The dramatic irony was staggering. Here was Robert Flores, a titan of industry, unknowingly confessing his intention to destroy the ancestral home of the woman who had just saved his life. He saw an empty wilderness ripe for development. She saw the heart of her family, her history, and her identity. He was laying all his cards on the table, completely in the dark about the royal flush she was holding. He spoke of the land as a commodity, a resource waiting to be exploited by a visionary like himself. This CEO was about to get the surprise of his life, a plot twist that would make his getting lost in the woods seem like a minor inconvenience. The gentle guide was listening, and she was about to speak. When Robert finally finished his grand monologue, expecting praise or at least impressed silence, Justine calmly broke the stillness. She didn't raise her voice or show any anger. Instead, she spoke with a passion that was quiet but incredibly powerful, a force of nature in its own right. "And what about the integrity of this place?" she asked, her question slicing through his corporate jargon like a hot knife through butter. It was a direct and unexpected challenge. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the deep, ancient soul of the forest itself. "You talk about building things," she said, her voice steady and sure. "But what about what you'll be destroying? This land has a life of its own. It has a spirit. Your resort would be a scar on something that is perfect as it is." She spoke with the authority of someone who wasn't just a visitor here, but a part of the very land he wanted to pave over. Robert was taken aback. He was used to arguments about zoning laws and environmental impact reports, not about the spirit of the land. Justine challenged his development plans on a level he was completely unprepared for. She spoke of the delicate ecosystem, the generations of wildlife, and the sacred history that his concrete paradise would obliterate forever. It wasn't a business argument, it was a moral one, a plea for preservation over profit. This was no longer a simple guide he was talking to. This was a fierce advocate, a guardian of the wild. Her passion was raw and real, an emotional force that made his talk of profit margins and luxury amenities seem suddenly trivial and shallow. She was fighting for something much bigger than herself, and the conviction in her voice was absolute. This was her true moment of overcoming the power imbalance between them, using only her words. She wasn't intimidated by him or his grand vision. In fact, she seemed to pity him for his blindness. You see an empty space, she continued, her voice softening slightly, but I see a full one. It's full of life, of history, of a beauty that your money can build or buy. Her words were a direct hit to his ego, challenging the very definition of value that he had built his life around. The landowner was, in spirit, already claiming her ground. He found himself without a response. His usual arguments about economic benefits and job creation felt hollow and weak in the face of her profound, heartfelt plea. She had calmly and passionately dismantled his entire project with a few simple sentences, not by attacking his business sense, but by questioning his soul. The conversation had taken a turn he never expected, and he was left questioning the very foundation of his ambition. As he listened to her, something profound happened to Robert. He found himself utterly captivated. It wasn't just her words, but the strength and unwavering principle behind them. In her, he saw a form of wealth he had never known, a richness of character, a deep integrity that made his own life of endless acquisitions feel shockingly hollow and meaningless in comparison. It was a heart-aching and deeply unsettling revelation. For the CEO, he looked at Justine, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. He saw not just a guide, but a woman of extraordinary substance, someone whose foundations were built on something far more solid than the shifting sands of the stock market. His world was about making things bigger, faster, more profitable. Her world was about preserving things that were timeless and sacred. A silent love story was beginning to write its first, tentative chapter in his heart. The captivation was so complete that his grand resort project, the pinnacle of his professional ambition, suddenly felt cheap. It felt like a childish fantasy, a gaudy bauble next to the authentic, rugged beauty she was defending. He, Robert Flores, the master of the universe, was feeling small. He realized his life had been a relentless pursuit of more, while she had found contentment and purpose in simply enough. This was more than just a change of mind, it was the beginning of a personal redemption. He was seeing the world through her eyes, and the view was both beautiful and damning. It exposed the spiritual poverty that had accompanied his material success. He felt a powerful, magnetic pull toward her principles, her strength, her very essence. It was a feeling that was as terrifying as it was exhilarating, a complete surrender of his old self. He realized his life was a carefully curated collection of things, of companies, of people who served his purpose. It was a life of acquisitions, but Justine's life was one of connection to the land, to her history, to a set of values that were not for sale. The contrast was a brutal, emotional blow. He felt a yearning for the kind of authenticity she embodied, a desire to be a man worthy of her respect. He was completely captivated by her strength, her spirit, her unwavering moral compass. The powerful CEO was fallen for the humble guide, not because of her looks or any worldly attribute, but because she represented a truth he had spent his entire life ignoring. His own world felt like a beautifully decorated but empty room, and she had just opened a window, letting in a fresh, wild breeze that threatened to sweep everything away. As if on cue, as if nature itself wanted to punctuate Justine's words. The weather turned. The wind began to howl through the trees, and the sky, which had been clear moments before, opened up in a torrential downpour. A sudden violent storm erupted around them, turning the forest from a place of serene beauty into a chaotic, dangerous labyrinth. It was a terrifying and immediate test, a surprise from the heavens. All of Robert's remaining arrogance was washed away in that instant. In the face of the storm's fury, his status as a CEO was utterly, comically irrelevant. He was just a man with a bad ankle, caught in a tempest. The last vestiges of his self-reliance were shattered. He had no choice but to put his complete and total trust in Justine's survival skills. His life was quite literally in her hands, a transfer of power made absolute by the raging storm. She, of course, was unfazed. "We need to find shelter now." She yelled over the wind, her voice a beacon of calm authority in the chaos. She moved with purpose and urgency, her experience as a guide shining brighter than ever. For Robert, this was the ultimate act of surrender. He had to follow her every command without question, trusting her instincts implicitly. It was the final brutal shattering of his ego, a necessary step in his journey of overcoming. The storm was a crucible, forging a new kind of bond between them. Huddled together under a rocky overhang she found with uncanny speed, the raw power of nature raging just feet away. All pretenses were gone. He was no longer the powerful CEO, and she was no longer just the guide. They were two people relying on each other, sharing the moment of intense vulnerability. The rescue had now entered a new, more profound stage. He watched her, her face illuminated by flashes of lightning, and saw not a hint of fear. He saw focus, determination, and a deep, instinctual wisdom. She was a force of nature in her own right, calm and capable in the face of chaos. In that moment, he knew he would follow her anywhere. His trust in her was absolute, a feeling so foreign to him, a man who trusted no one, that it felt like a complete rewiring of his soul. This sudden storm was the final nail in the coffin of his old self. It stripped him bare, forcing him to confront his own helplessness and rely on the strength of another. The last of his arrogance was gone, replaced by a profound and humbling respect. He had to trust her not just for navigation, but for his very survival. A surprise twist that sealed his transformation far more effectively than any conversation could have. Huddled in the temporary shelter, waiting for the storm to pass, the silence between them was no longer awkward. It was filled with a new, unspoken understanding. Robert watched Justine, and what he felt was no longer just admiration or respect. It was something deeper, something warmer. He was beginning to develop deep, undeniable feelings for her. A love story was quietly blooming in the heart of the storm, a testament to their shared ordeal. He realized that her greatest assets weren't things that could be listed on a resume or a financial statement. It wasn't just her skills as a guide, it was her character. Her integrity, her kindness, her quiet strength, her profound connection to the world around her. These were the things that defined her. These were the qualities that made her truly wealthy, and they were the qualities that were capturing his heart. It was a deeply emotional realization for him. For the first time, he saw a future that wasn't defined by the next acquisition or the next billion-dollar deal. He saw a future that could be defined by shared values, by genuine connection, by a life of meaning. And at the center of that vision was Justine. He felt as if destiny had led him into this forest, made him get lost, and sent this storm, all to bring him to this one heart-aching moment of clarity. His feelings for her were terrifying because they were so pure. They weren't based on status or convenience or what she could do for him. He was falling for her spirit, for the very essence of who she was. This was entirely new territory for the CEO, who had always viewed relationships as another form of strategic alliance. This wasn't strategy, this was raw, honest emotion, and it was overwhelming. He recognized that his life, for all its glamour and success, was a desert. And Justine was an oasis. She represented an authenticity and a depth that he desperately craved, even if he hadn't known it until now. This love story wasn't a fairy tale, it felt like a necessary, fated collision of two completely different worlds, designed to save him from his own emptiness. As the rain began to soften and the thunder receded into the distance, Robert knew that something inside him had fundamentally and irrevocably changed. He was developing deep feelings for this incredible woman, not just as a savior, but as a partner, an equal, a guiding star. The rescue was complete, but the love story he hoped was just beginning. It was a destiny he was suddenly eager to embrace. The air was clean and fresh after the storm, and in the quiet aftermath, Robert felt a desperate need to be honest. The carefully constructed walls of the CEO had crumbled completely, leaving only the man vulnerable and raw. He turned to Justine, his heart pounding in his chest, and decided to confess what he was feeling. "Justine," he began, his voice barely a whisper, I have to tell you something." He confessed his admiration for her, but it came out as more than that. He spoke of how her strength and principles had completely undone him, how she had shown him a world of richness he never knew existed. He wasn't trying to charm her, he was simply laying his soul bare, a final act of surrender. It was the most honest he had been with anyone, including himself, in his entire life. The emotional weight of the moment was immense. For the first time, Robert felt that he was the one who had nothing of value to offer. What could his money or his empire possibly mean to a woman like her? She valued things he had spent his life ignoring: integrity, connection, history, kindness. In her presence, he felt like a pauper, his billions like a pile of shiny, useless rocks. It was a profound and humbling role reversal, the ultimate act of his redemption. "You are the most impressive person I have ever met," he said, the words feeling inadequate to express the depth of his feelings. "You saved my life, yes, but you've done more than that. You've woken me up." He looked at her, hoping she could see the sincerity in his eyes, the complete absence of any agenda. This wasn't a power play, it was a plea. This was the beginning of his new story, a love story he hoped she would be a part of. He felt a strange sense of freedom in this confession. By admitting he had nothing of true value to offer her, he was letting go of the one thing that had defined and imprisoned him his entire life: his wealth. His confession wasn't just about his feelings for her, it was about his desire for redemption. His hope that he could become a man who was worthy of the values she embodied. He had spent his life being the one who had everything, the one everyone wanted something from. Now he was the one wanting something he wasn't sure he could ever earn. A chance. He had confessed his admiration, his awe, his burgeoning love, all while feeling like he was the one with empty pockets. The powerful CEO had finally learned what it meant to be truly humbled, to ask for something that money could not buy. As they finally reached the edge of civilization, the sight that greeted them was jarring. A fleet of black, sterile SUVs was waiting, and a team of anxious-looking executives in sharp suits rushed forward as soon as they saw Robert. The bubble of authenticity they had created in the wilderness popped in an instant. The superficial world he belonged to had come crashing back in, loud and unwelcome. He was once again the CEO. His corporate team, relieved to see him immediately, swarmed him, their attention solely on their boss. They barely gave Justine a second glance, their eyes sweeping over her worn, practical clothing with dismissive disinterest. To them, she was just some local, a piece of the scenery, a temporary helper who was no longer needed. Their dismissive treatment of her was a shocking and immediate reminder of the world he came from. Robert felt a hot flash of anger and shame. These were his people, his hand-picked team, and their behavior was a direct reflection of the values he himself had championed for years. They saw the world in terms of status and utility, and Justine, in her simple gear, didn't register as important. He watched them talk over her, ignoring her presence, and it was like looking into a very ugly mirror. He saw the stark contrast between the two worlds laid bare. On one side was Justine, a figure of quiet strength, kindness, and integrity. On the other was his team, a group of people who, like him, had been trained to see others as either assets or obstacles. The way they treated the guide was a painful reminder of how he himself had treated her just a day before. The thought made him sick to his stomach. Justine, true to form, didn't seem offended. She simply stood back, a calm observer watching the circus unfold. But Robert saw it all. He saw their condescension, their impatience to get him away from this rustic scene and back to their world of spreadsheets and conference calls. This blatant Disrespect toward the woman who had just saved his life was more than he could bear. The shock was not that they acted this way, but that he had never seen how ugly it was before. The experience was deeply unsettling for Robert. He felt a powerful, protective urge toward Justine, and a profound revulsion for the superficiality of his own life. The return to civilization wasn't a relief, it felt like a step backward, a return to a prison he hadn't even realized he was in. He was caught between two worlds, and the one that was supposed to be his home suddenly felt completely alien. In the days that followed the rescue, Robert felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if he were a ghost haunting his own life. He sat in his sleek, minimalist office, staring out at the city skyline, but his mind was still in the forest. He felt completely torn between his old life, with all its power and luxury, and the authentic, heart-aching connection he had found with Justine. The contrast was a constant, nagging ache in his soul. His world of high-stakes negotiations and ruthless corporate strategy suddenly felt like a meaningless game. The thrill of the deal was gone, replaced by a yearning for the quiet truth he had glimpsed in the wilderness. The conversations with his board members felt hollow, their concerns petty and small compared to the life and death stakes he had just faced. This was the ultimate challenge of overcoming not a mountain, but his own identity. He couldn't get Justine out of his mind. Her face, her voice, her quiet strength were a constant presence. He replayed their conversations over and over, her words about integrity and the spirit of the land echoing in his head. This wasn't just a fleeting crush, it was a fundamental reordering of his priorities. The love story that had started in the woods was now at war with the empire he had built. It was a battle for his very destiny. He felt like two different people trapped in one body. There was the CEO, Robert Flores, the man who was expected to be ruthless, ambitious, and single-minded in his pursuit of profit. And then there was just Robert, the man who had been saved by a kind and principled guide, the man who was falling in love and questioning everything he had ever believed in. He was at a crossroads, and he knew he couldn't stand there forever. The impending town hall meeting for his resort project loomed over him like a death sentence. It represented everything he was now beginning to despise: the arrogance of his vision, the destruction of something beautiful for the sake of profit, the ultimate betrayal of the values Justine had awakened in him. How could he stand up in front of a community and advocate for a project that his heart now rejected? The emotional conflict was tearing him apart. He was torn between the man he was supposed to be and the man he wanted to become. His old life was a gilded cage, comfortable and secure, but a cage nonetheless. The path Justine represented was uncertain, terrifying, and would require him to dismantle everything he had built. But it was also the only path that felt real. His destiny was calling, and he had to make a choice that would define the rest of his life. The night of the town hall meeting arrived. The room was packed with locals, journalists, and his own corporate team, all buzzing with anticipation. Robert walked to the podium, his stomach in knots. He felt like a fraud, about to sell a dream he no longer believed in. He scanned the crowd, his eyes searching for one face, but he didn't see her. He took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the speech that felt like a lie. The town mayor began the proceedings, thanking everyone for coming. And before we hear from Mr. Flores, the mayor said, "I'd like to introduce the person whose voice is most important here tonight. As the sole owner of the vast majority of the land in question, her approval is paramount." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. A sole landowner? This was a detail his team had somehow missed. This was a secret well kept. "Please join me in welcoming Ms. Justine Evans," the mayor announced. Robert's blood ran cold. He looked toward the side of the stage, and there she was, walking toward the podium with that same quiet confidence he knew so well. It was her, his guide, his savior, the woman he was falling for, and the secret landowner of the very wilderness he was about to propose destroying. He was utterly, completely, and profoundly shocked. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The plot twist was so perfect, so cosmically ironic, that he almost laughed. Of course it was her. The pieces clicked into place with a devastating clarity. Her passion, her fierce defense of the land, her refusal of his money. It all made sense now. He looked at her, and she met his gaze, a flicker of a sad smile on her lips. It was a heart-aching and mind-blowing moment of surprise. In that instant, his decision was made. All the conflict, all the doubt, vanished. He knew what he had to do. When it was his turn to speak, he walked to the podium and threw his prepared speech on the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction, "my plans have changed." A shocked silence fell over the room. His team looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "This project is canceled," he declared. Gasps echoed through the hall. He then turned and looked directly at Justine. "I came here to conquer a piece of land, but instead, I met a woman who taught me the meaning of true wealth. I've been a fool." He faced the crowd again, his voice thick with emotion. "This land is not for sale." Then, in front of everyone, he turned back to the shocked landowner. "And now," he said humbly, "I'm asking for a chance. Not to buy her land, but to win her heart." This was his redemption. And so, a story that began with a powerful CEO lost in the woods ends with him finding his true north in the most unexpected way. What a journey of destiny and redemption. It serves as such a heart-aching reminder that the greatest plot twists in our lives often lead us directly to who we were meant to be. Robert's story shows us that sometimes you have to lose everything you think is important to finally gain the one thing you actually need. His redemption wasn't just about canceling a project, it was about rewriting his entire definition of wealth. Think about the incredible strength of Justine Evans. As the secret landowner and a humble guide, she held all the power from the very beginning, yet she never used it with arrogance. She led with kindness, integrity, and a deep love for her world, proving that true strength isn't about how loud you can shout, but about the quiet conviction of your principles. Their emotional love story is a testament to the idea that the most authentic connections are forged not in boardrooms, but in moments of shared vulnerability and profound respect. This was such an emotional journey of overcoming for us to share, and now we would love to hear from you. What part of this story impacted you the most? Was it the initial shock of the rescue, the quiet tension in the forest, or that incredible plot twist at the town hall meeting? We want to know what moment was the most heart-aching for you. Share your favorite part in the comments below. We truly love reading your perspectives and feeling the story through your eyes. Did you see that ending coming? Or were you expecting a different destiny for Robert and Justine? We're curious to know if you were satisfied with his redemption, or if you would have written a different final chapter for their love story. There's no right or wrong answer, so let us know your honest thoughts. Your engagement is what makes this community so special, and we appreciate every single one of you who takes a moment to share and connect with us on a deeper level. If this story of surprise, kindness, and redemption touched your heart, please do us a huge favor and give this video a like. It truly helps our channel reach more people who need to hear stories like this. And if you haven't already, please make sure you follow our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss out on the next emotional journey we have waiting for you. Your support means the world to us. We have a whole library of videos just like this one, filled with heart-aching moments and powerful life lessons, so be sure to check those out after this. Thank you once again for spending your time with us today. Don't be a stranger in the comments, and we will see you in the next story. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss what we have coming up next.